Hello class, this documentary is about a man named Jacob Astor, a German immigrant turned millionaire in the early 19th century. In this documentary, we will be focusing mainly on Astor's progression and the amassing of his fortune, but we will also look at why his enterprise thrived and examine the role of capitalism in the industries he was involved in. For this first video, we will be looking at the periods from Jacob Astor's childhood until 1808, at which point he established the Pacific Fur Company. Jacob Astor was born in 1763 in Waldorf, Germany. His father was a, quote, ne'er-do-well butcher. His mother was the far more responsible and parsimonious of the two. They lived in considerable poverty, primarily because the people of Waldorf could not afford meat on a routine basis. He had 3 older brothers, the first of which, George, left home and set up a musical instruments business in London. The second brother, Henry, left home for New York City to become a butcher. The third, John Melchior, became the steward of a German estate. After the death of his mother, Jacob's father remarried a bitter and crude woman with whom he constantly quarreled. Jacob did not get along with her, and some nights he would leave the house and stay in the attic or outhouse of a friend, accepting any food they could spare and returning in the morning to work for his father. He left home in 1780 at the age of 16 and found work on a lumber barge. He made his way down the Rhine River, and by the time he reached the ocean, he had saved enough money to buy a ticket for passage to London. Upon his arrival in London, he found a place to stay with his brother George, and began working at the musical instrument store that George had started. While there, he learned to speak English. He took great interest in the American colonies, which were at that time still in rebellion. By 1783, the American Revolution had successfully concluded, and Astor had enough funds for the journey to America. In November, he boarded a ship to Chesapeake Bay with approximately $25 and 7 flutes from his brother's business to use as items for trade. The passage from London to the bay lasted from November to the end of January. Upon the ship's arrival, it was frozen in place and remained there for 2 months. During this time, Astor befriended a man native to Germany, as he was, who had been to North America before and who had successfully worked as a fur tradesman. By the time the ice melted in March of 1874, Jacob had learned enough about the fur trade to know that it was what he wanted to pursue. He and his new friend then traveled to New York from Baltimore, and when they arrived, they stayed with Henry Astor, Jacob's brother. About a year after his arrival in New York and working with his brother, Astor married a young American girl of Dutch lineage named Sarah Todd. The union held more value than simply that of love. Sarah also brought with her a natural capability to discern between good and bad furs, an ardent interest in business, and a dowry of $300 with which the couple began a shop. Their shop sold musical instruments that Astor crafted, and they would use the profit to purchase furs. They lived simply and by frugal means. It is said that when Jacob would go out on the frontier to collect furs, he would leave the tending of the business to Sarah, which was a revolutionary idea for the time, as women were not seen as capable of controlling land and business. Within a few years, the business had taken off, and the Astors had gained connections across America's Northwest Territories, and more impressively in Montreal, the center of the fur trade. Jay's Treaty, in which Great Britain agreed to evacuate its forts in the West, greatly benefited Astor. Upon its ratification in 1794, Astor was able to expand his business west, and with his great increase of wealth, he was able to hire out other trappers and run his business from New York.
Under Astor, the American Fur Company resembled a modern corporation with specialists, division of labor, and vertical integration. He ran the company from his headquarters in New York. Mackinac Island, in the Michigan Territory, was the center of the actual trading, where most furs were bought, packed on boats, and sent over to the East Coast. Astor's agents dotted the rivers throughout the Northwest, and they had log cabins well stocked with goods. They supplied the company's fur traders, who would live with different Indian tribes and supply them with goods and credit as needed. In conducting business this way, Astor differed from McKinney and the government factories. McKinney and his predecessors just built trading posts to stock them with goods and expected the Indians to come there to trade. Many Indians, however, lived hundreds of miles from a factory and had no supplies to trap with. Even if McKinney had given credit easily and had known whom to trust, the Indians would have been hampered by distances. Under Astor's system, the fur traders lived with the Indians, learned whom to trust, and bought and sold on the spot.